Good morning and welcome to today's T&D World web chats titled Stop, Drop, and Rollout Drone Inspections for Fire Mitigation, sponsored by Cyberhawk. I'm Nikki Chandler, Editorial Director for T&D World with Endeavor Business Media. To begin, let me explain how you can participate in the presentation. First, if you have any technical difficulties during the session, please submit that to the questions window and our technical experts will help you out. We do recommend disabling any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser, as those can sometimes cause issues with that webinar player. Additionally, we do welcome your questions during the event today. We'll answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that will follow the main discussion. But please feel free to send in those questions at any time. To do so, simply type your questions into the question window and hit the submit button, and we'll take those at any time. To refer a colleague to today's discussion, share it on social media or access event resources. There you can click the icons on the left side rail of your screen. Please be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the T&D World website within the next 24 hours. You'll be notified by email when that archive is available. Now, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists for the discussion today. Chris Fleming is the CEO of Cyberhawk. He's been the visionary of Cyberhawk since its inception in 2008. He is recognized as one of the pioneers in the drone industry, having led many of Cyberhawk's early world's firsts on projects around the globe. As an inspection engineer, Chris has worked extensively in power generation, oil and gas, mining, and utilities around the world, including Australia, the Middle East, UK, and the USA. Then we do have Matt Zafuto. He's the CCO at Cyberhawk. Matt has been a leader and catalyst for improving T&D grid operations and a catalyst for corporate and industry change for the past 28 years. During this time, he's focused on driving business process changes with technology innovations in energy utility operations to address reliability and workforce efficiency. His career highlights include establishing and executing strategy at the corporate level, aligning the line of business objectives to the corporate strategy, and tactical execution of strategy objectives at Fortune 500 companies such as IBM, ABB, and Xcel Energy, and most recently as Chief Commercial Officer for Cyberhawk. Welcome to you both. And today we're just going to have a chat, like we mentioned, in this discussion. And we're going to talk about wildfire mitigation. So welcome to you both. And let's just go ahead and dive into that first question so we can get this going. Tell us, why are wildfire mitigation programs important? And that's really, as we were mentioning before, a key topic right now, especially.
Thanks, Nikki. And firstly, hello to everybody out there watching. Wildfire mitigation inspection programs are really important, I think, because of the consequences of not doing them. Keeping people safe, firstly, is obviously of paramount importance. And it's not just a concern in the US or in California, it's a global issue. We've seen wildfires ravage the Australian outback, taking people's lives, killing billions of animals, and costing a lot of money. So it's really the consequences of not doing these wildfire mitigation programs. So safety for us in Cyberhawk is number one, keeping people safe, preventing people from having to climb assets, putting them in harm's way. And I think that really does chime with our industry partners, with utility companies who want to prevent their assets from catching fire, causing wildfires. And it's super important, as I said, not just here, but it's a global issue and one that's not going to go away in the near future, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Nikki. I was just going to
go ahead, Matt. Yeah.
Go. We see our customers have always had safety KPIs first, and that's not only for their employees and their contractors, but more importantly for the communities that they serve. So, wildfire mitigation really is about, providing a safe environment for these communities. And, I think we've seen an ecosystem that's formed that we'll talk about, I think, a little bit later on with regards to partnership with communities in mitigating these wildfires as well. I think at the end of the day, people want to make sure that, the best way to deal with a wildfire is to prevent it. And that's where technology and procedures come into play.
Yeah, and I would agree that community outreach and partnership is very crucial. So I appreciate that. Uh, can you tell us really how do utilities identify those high risk areas, that are prone to wildfires so that they can target mitigation efforts?
Yeah, I think this is where there's a convergence inside the utility, having worked in a utility before and worked with utilities for a number of years. There's this convergence now where vegetation management, asset management, and the operational management and control systems all come together to really form an approach to identifying potential weaknesses in the utility network, and then working not only to mitigate them up front, but then when an event does happen, how to best address that during the event. Technology is an enabler to that for sure, but that close coordination where utilities are trying to break down silos, and in a lot of cases have done so very effectively to address these events.
I think the high risk areas, Nikki, are, as everybody knows, where we have issues with a lot of vegetation. So I think utilities tend to focus their efforts there. Secondly, if there are assets that have a high consequence of failure, so lines that come off power stations, for instance, they're critical, so they tend to get inspected more frequently. So what we're seeing is certainly a risk-based approach to inspecting assets, and the consequence of failure if something does fail or catch fire. So I think that's how they're kind of triaging their response to wildfires.
That makes sense. So what steps can utilities take, or well, what steps are they taking to adapt their infrastructure to the changing climate? And then, really, I feel like we're seeing an increased wildfire risk.
They're doing a lot, Nikki. There are a whole lot of initiatives around this phrase of grid hardening, in terms of making sure that the network is reliable, and vegetation management is one of those strategies. We've seen some utility companies now starting to underground their lines, so which is of course extremely expensive, but that's one way to ensure that you don't cause a wildfire is to put them underground. But there's some smart grid technology. What they're doing in trying to predict wildfires is using a number of analytic platforms to kind of foresee what might happen if you had different weather patterns which might exacerbate the problem. So there are a whole host of initiatives around this issue, one of which is one that we're heavily involved in, of course, which is using drones to find issues before they cause problems. But the industry is not sleeping. There are a whole lot of initiatives that they're tackling all at once to try and reduce the risk for their customers and their assets.
Yeah, I mean, the inspection technology has certainly advanced quite a bit, especially over the past decade. Utilities have been required, obviously, to inspect their assets, and have done so, initially on foot, sometimes using fixed wing or helicopters, which proved to be quite expensive to operate, and you don't get the fidelity of the data that you're looking for. UAS solutions, or the use of drones, really gives the ability to get a higher degree of confidence in what the inspections are yielding. And again, that helps them to prevent an event before it occurs, helps enhance not only their ability to prevent wildfires, but quite frankly, to enhance their reliability KPIs, whether we're talking about KD or safety. It really has an end-to-end value to our utility customers.
So, definitely more than one advantage to that, using that. So, we know there are challenges. What are the challenges of assets that are not directly viewable? And when you talked about some of the ways they did that, what are the implications for not being able to immediately view these assets?
The ability to really identify these defects has pretty significant consequences. A lot of times these assets, as Chris indicated, they're in faraway places. They're difficult to get to. They're not often inspected. In some cases, the assets may not be where the utility originally tracked those assets to be. So the consequences of not having that is that you don't know what's getting ready to happen before it happens. We have a customer that says we want to find those problems before those problems find us. And really that is the essence of what the consequences are. If you leverage the technology that's available today, you can find those defects and address them before those defects become a significant problem for you.
I think one of the great things that we offer, Nikki, or our industry offers, is this unique perspective on these distributed assets. So typically, in the past, utility companies would use ground crews or helicopters to inspect those assets, and you really don't get this level of detail, the fine fidelity that you get with a drone, because often the issues we find are not above the asset, but you need to be beneath the top of the asset and looking up to spot the defects. So drones offer this really unique perspective and allow us to capture a significant number of assets now with the evolving technology, which I'm sure you'll get into. But they're in the middle of nowhere. They're difficult to see. The assets can even, the condition of them can change year to year. You can look at something 1 year and think it's fine, and then the next year have an issue with it. So because they're in the middle of nowhere, it's a real challenge for utility companies.
Yeah, and you mentioned being able to capture that data, and that's one element. But what are the challenges, and how are utilities managing all their data? I mean, I know a few years ago we were talking about big data, and utilities really didn't know what they were doing with it. I think it's improved since then, but what would you guys say? How are utilities managing that data, and what are those challenges, as I mentioned?
I think when utility companies start inspecting their assets, they're managing, small number of assets, a small number of images, and that can be done in OneDrive. I think the challenge really presents itself is when you start doing things at scale. And now what we're doing is, we used to say we're doing thousands of things. We're now doing hundreds of thousands of inspections a year for specific companies. And it's just not possible to manage it unless you have some type of visual data management solution. And as you can imagine, we're taking high resolution images, we're capturing LiDAR data, and it's hard to move it around, it's expensive to store, and you want to have those findings at your fingertips. You don't want to be searching or trawling through data to find an issue. I'm sure we all use iPhones. It's not, one of the features that I love is being able to search for a particular thing and find it quickly. That doesn't exist for utility companies right now. And having a visual data management solution like iHawk, the one we've created, really allows them to not only gather that data and sort and save it, but interpret it quickly and make decisions about what to do next. And that's the solution that we're providing.
We had one customer as an example. We found a defect when we flew the drone. That data was immediately ingested into iHawk. The company went and looked at that particular defect and realized there was a cotter pin on an energized line that was getting ready to drop. And so they were able to get a crew out there the next day. Otherwise, that could have been a catastrophe. And it happened to be in close proximity to a lot of vegetation as well. So that's an example of a wildfire that didn't happen. If you're storing, if the problem to solve for is just storing the data from the drones, well, okay, you can do that with OneDrive. If the problem to solve for is accelerating that speed to decision, like in the circumstance that I just mentioned, that's where a visual data management solution is really what's required in order to get to that. And if we look at just the big data problem, Nikki, that you had indicated, that just in the United States, there's 1.5 million miles of transmission lines. There's 6 million miles of above ground distribution lines. That's a lot of data to be captured, obviously, by a number of different companies. But the ability to identify the defects along that integrated grid and do that very quickly, that's where a visual data management solution is not only a nice to have, it really is a requisite set of technology to really get to those decisions.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Chris, did you have anything to add to that one before we jump into that next question?
No, I think I think people don't usually see the issue until there's a bottleneck, and they typically have to be doing it at scale before it becomes an issue, and that's what's going to happen in the next few years.
Yeah. So speaking of the next few years, how do you see the future of wildfire mitigations program or wildfire mitigation programs evolving and changing? We're where we're at now, but will they change? Will they evolve? And hopefully, I think they will. But what do you guys think?
Oh, I think they're going to change massively. We're starting to see that happen already. So one of the bottlenecks to the technology that we provide, a couple of things. Firstly, is that we can't often fly drones further than we can see. So we want to fly them beyond visual line of sight. That's the phrase that's used. And the FAAs, the CAAs of this world have been pretty reticent in granting those waivers, but we're starting to see those happen now. So that's the first thing. Once we can fly drones further than we can see more easily, then we can capture more assets in a single flight, and that's going to decrease the cost. That's the first thing. The second thing is automation. We train our pilots to an extremely high level to capture high quality data on a repeatable basis, but it's intensive. It's quite an intensive task for that individual. And automation, the ability to fly or have a drone fly around an asset without a huge amount of human operation, is going to allow this to proliferate. That's the second thing. And the third thing that's going to really accelerate the adoption is around AI, the ability to detect the issues that Matt talked about in the images that we capture without a human having to intervene. And if you can imagine these algorithms that we and other people are creating, in order to find the defects, you need to have a lot of examples of those defects. And we're fairly new in this industry, so we don't have that library of defects yet to train the algorithms. But it is increasing. So I can foresee a future where utility companies are not inspecting their assets on a 5-yearly basis. They're saying, look, the data we're getting is so much better. It's allowing us to make decisions this year about how to spend our money more wisely next year. Why wouldn't we do this on an annual basis? And if we can see that cost per asset drop, then I really think utility companies would say, well, why wouldn't we choose to do it more frequently? That's kind of where I see this going in the next few years, Nikki. Matt?
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. And I think that regulators, especially because of some of the unfortunate circumstances, even as we're having this web chat today, that regulators are getting increasingly proactive about asking our custtomers, what are you doing about wildfire mitigation, and what is the technology that will enable that? And that's where I think there will be an acceleration of a more high-tech approach to dealing with these problems, and again, trying to prevent them before they happen.
I hope so, and I really think that the industry is doing what it can, you know, and with the support of you know, people like Cyberhawk, and hopefully we can get, and then, you know, like you said, the regulators kind of challenging that. So, you know, I see a hopeful future for this. So a few of you have already submitted questions. So we're going to kind of jump into the questions that the viewers have submitted. But as a reminder, if you'd still like to submit a question, just go ahead and type that question into the question window on the side of your screen and hit submit. Also, please stay until the end of the presentation to complete our exit survey, and that's going to pop up on your screen. And you can go ahead and preview those questions now by clicking the exit survey icon on the left side rail. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to a viewer question. Let's see. Do you have some experience with, let me see where that went. Oh, yeah. Do you have some experience with forest fire monitoring and prevention in Portugal? The viewer says that they have a huge problem there from April to October with eucalyptus forests. So wondering if you had any experience with that.
It wasn't forest fire monitoring that we've done in Portugal, but we have done inspections in Portugal before on transmission and distribution assets. So yeah, we've done work there already, and Portugal is one of the people who sort of mentioned is one of these high risk environments, very dry climate like Greece, prone to wildfire. So yes, we have done work in Portugal.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know. And when you said it was an international problem, and you know, we'd mentioned some of the countries, and I hadn't even thought of Portugal, but it's really a lot of places that need this. So the next one is for vegetation management. What are the major requirements, and how will drone inspection help determine the compliance?
That's interesting. We've got one customer that actually was using iHawk. Not they were using it for asset inspection. Somebody from their vegetation management department actually saw iHawk, and they said, "Wait a minute, we can actually use this for vegetation management as well." And what it enabled them to do was be a lot more efficient with their resources. So they could see vegetation that needed to be dealt with, and also some vegetation that was that they anticipated having to do tree trimming on, but it actually wasn't necessary. And they found that in a particular district, they were able to reduce their OPEX cost by 25%. So I think the net of what I'm trying to say here is that it helps them to be more efficient with their current vegetation management programs.
Majority of, Nikki, just to add to that, the majority for vegetation management, the preferred tool is LiDAR, collecting LiDAR with a drone. It was, you know, typically done with helicopters, but having that point cloud, which allows you to then determine distances between trees and the assets is really useful too, just to help out.
Yeah, it makes sense. Here's another one. How do you consolidate the risk trade-off with putting another potential risk, drone failure, etc., into those high-risk wildfire areas?
Good question. Yeah. So what we do right now in those high-risk environments where our teams work, they're not typically operating BVLOS, so they can always see the drone. So if something should happen, they have firefighting equipment which they take in their vehicles, so they can put out a limited fire if they were to cause one. But there's a lot of checks and balances in what we do. The biggest risk with a drone is is a fire with the battery, lipo fire, which is extremely difficult to put out because it burns at such a high temperature. But there's a lot of checks that you can do on the condition of the batteries before you fly, making sure you don't fly beyond the tolerance of the batteries, and operating in a way that's prudent. And we've built those procedures up over a number of years, and happy to say, touch wood, we have never caused a fire. So
yeah, just to kind of tag on to that, the interesting part about that, Nikki, is that yeah, Chris and I could go to Best Buy today, buy a drone, and start flying a drone around. And I think that there's the perception that if somebody is a hobbyist, that they can go ahead and just start flying a drone. The reality is that our drone pilots are highly skilled professionals. These are professional services that we provide that include, as Chris indicated, all of the safety procedures that we've built up over 16 years, so that we know how to not only operate the drone, but operate it safely, and then capture the right data to get the desired business outcome. And that includes, safety at the forefront of everything that we do.
Yeah, so great answer. Here's another one. How are you storing your data, LiDAR imagery, etc.?
Yeah, we leverage our solution is iHawk. iHawk can provide that data capture and storage for any other providers as well. And if the customer is gathering data, or if they already have LiDAR data, we can provide that as well. In many cases, we do have some customers that don't use iHawk, and they're prescriptive about their own storage of data. And there's a data flow associated with all of that as well. So the best way to think about this is that iHawk can exist with or without Cyberhawk professional services of capturing the data. And also Cyberhawk professional services can exist with or without iHawk as part of the end-to-end solution.
I think, I don't know if this is a question of the individual, but LiDAR, when you collect data, you get this massive point cloud, which is pretty difficult. It takes ages to load on your computer. And so what we decided to do is, rather than render that point cloud, which takes quite a while to load, we load the insights. So where you have clash detection, the ability to separate or show those distances from assets. So I think that's important, because if you're using software and it takes ages to work, it's very frustrating. And that's what happens with point cloud data. So we prefer to share the insights rather than the true point cloud.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll get to the exit survey. But what is the cost savings for drone inspections versus helicopter? And they're asking per hour. I don't know if you guys can go into quite detail on that, but
I actually don't. Maybe Matt knows the answer to that question. But the first thing is, I would point out the savings. The real driver is in terms of safety. It's not a great statistic, and I think helicopters are wonderful machines. I've flown them lots, but statistically they are unsafe, and so I think drones provide a better ROI. Matt, anything you want to?
Yeah, the big difference, the value of the data, a helicopter hover, and it is quite for a person to be hanging out the side of a helicopter to do efficiently and safely. And so there is depending on, these are use cases. So you wouldn't use a drone in every single circumstance, but it is a great way to be a lot more efficient about specific data capture at higher fidelity. I think that's really the benefit.
okay. I think I'll do one more question before we go ahead and wrap up, since we have about a minute left. What are there certification or licensing requirements, particularly in the U.S., to operate drones for T&D substations? hotspot inspections? I know you guys had mentioned there's, you know, you had your pilots are trained.
So there are qualifications that you need in order to fly a drone commercially, but there are no specific requirements to fly a drone in or near a substation. What we see is a utility company will say, you know, we'll have a risk assessment around particular assets, and there'll be training associated with flying around more complex assets. But there are not industry recognized courses that people can do in order to fly around a substation. They just, because it's a fairly new industry, they just don't exist yet. It's
Okay.
internal training.
Okay. We have run out of time. So for those questions that we didn't have time to answer, we'll be getting back to you via email. And like I said, a reminder for that survey as we exit. But on behalf of T&D World, I really would like to thank Chris and Matt for the discussion today, Cyberhawk for sponsoring the webinar, and of course, all of you for joining. Thanks and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, guys.